Hello, Blake Rudis here with Everyday HDR and HDRinsider.com, and today I want to talk about the Phantom 3 Professional and just how well this little guy flies. It's pretty easy to do. We're going to go into the flight characteristics, how it flies. We're going to get into some of the picture and video quality, and in particular how photographers can use the raw files out of this to make some incredible images. So enough out of me. I'm sure you want to see how this thing works. Let's go ahead and jump into this. Okay, so before we get into the flight, which is something I'm really excited about, and I'm pretty sure you are too, let's talk about the aircraft first. This is the Phantom 3 Pro quadcopter. Now, I've named mine Firefly 1 because I'm assuming that after playing with it for so much, there's going to be a 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if you look at mine, you'll see that I have gold and blue as my colors on mine. They come with a series of decals right in the box of their DJI quadcopter, but I chose gold and blue because those are my school colors. You know, go Fighting Blue Hens, University of Delaware. All right, anybody out there, University of Delaware? You'll also notice on mine that I've put the guards on mine, the propeller guards on mine, and it's very important that you have some type of protection for those because even the slightest little touch on those propellers while it's flying and this thing could go kinds of all crazy. Not only that, those blades are very powerful. I'm going to give you an embarrassing story here. The first thing I did, I opened up my DJI Phantom 3, put the battery in, hooked up my phone, didn't read the directions, and tried to take off in my basement. Wasn't a very good thing. So your quadcopter is not going to come with the guards. So the first thing that happened was my quadcopter went right into the side of the wall, chipped away some of the drywall, and it was pretty ugly. So since then, I have purchased some aftermarket guards. You can see that the string that's on there that protects your hand from going into those blades is quite dirty because I've run into quite a few things. It's also been known to work like a lawnmower. Yep. So it does cut grass as well. So the weight on this thing, about 2.8 pounds. Maximum ascent speed is about 11.1 miles per hour going up. Now, these are in miles per hour, the imperial system. Everything on the DJI website will be in the metric system. So I've converted it to make it easier for me and my US-friendly friends here for this tutorial. Maximum descent, 6.7 miles per hour going down. Your max speed is about 35 miles per hour. Your maximum altitude is 1,640 feet, which is about 500 meters. However, the FAA does regulate you at 400 feet, and that's probably a pretty good idea here because once you get past 400 feet, it's very hard to hear it and it's hard to see it. So you definitely want to maintain those operating limitations. Let's look at the camera on the Phantom 3 Pro. It's got a Sony Exmor sensor, 12 megapixel count, ISO range between 100 and 3200 for video and 100 and 1600 for photo. The shutter speed is 8 seconds to 1/8,000th of a second. It takes a micro SD card up to 64 gigabytes class 10 UHS 1. Video specs, it has 4K video on the Pro version and only the HD video 1080p on the advanced version. So keep that in mind. This is the Pro version, so it's got that 4K video quality, which we'll look at that later too. It's incredible. There's your 1080 quality and your frames per second and your regular HD 720 quality. The still photo specs, it's got single burst 357, auto exposure bracketing, 3 or 5 exposures with a bracket bias of 0.7 exposure value. So if you're into HDR like I am, that means you can only get a 0.7 spread or 2/3 of an exposure spread per bracket. So it's not really that effective on the 3 side, but it is pretty effective on the 5 side. Couple more things about the camera. It does shoot in RAW, which is a .dng file or JPEG, and those DNG files are really good files to work with in post-processing, so we'll talk about that later. It is equipped with a controllable stabilized gimbal, and that is very cool because during the pitch and the yaw, while you're moving the aircraft, the gimbal will actually stay in one specified spot, which is nice because you can do some nice rolling video by moving the aircraft to the left and to the right, and that gimbal will keep that camera stabilized on that one spot. Let's talk about the remote. The remote's pretty interesting. It's got 2 joysticks on it. We'll talk about that later as we talk about the actual flight characteristics and how you make this thing take off. Frequency 2.4 to 2.48 gigahertz. Max distance 1.24 miles. Again, that's in the imperial system. Battery, it's self-contained 6000 mAh battery. It's right in there. So when you charge this, you actually charge it with the port that's on the side of the remote. It's not recommended that you charge the remote and the battery at the same time. Device holder can hold a tablet or a phone up to 10 inches. Now I say up to 10 inches in the display size, but that may not fit all 10-inch displays. I went ahead and took the liberty of measuring that inside space. So if your tablet has the width of 6.5 inches, it will fit within the tablet or phone holder that you see on the remote. It may come with an added expense if you want to get a tablet that will fit, or if your phone doesn't work. You're going to have to check the DJI website because they always update it with newer devices that have been tested with the app that runs with the remote. The battery, it's got about 23-minute flight time, and I've tested this. It's pretty interesting. So you can actually set what your critical battery settings are, and I suggest that you do that in your app because I've set mine to about 13%. So at that 13% mark, the helicopter will actually turn around from whatever it is that you're doing and say, hey, I've got a critical battery, I am coming home, and it will start heading back towards you, and it will land at that critical moment when the battery is out. So that way it keeps it from falling on people. It's a very intuitive design. This thing is very intuitive. We'll get into all the different aspects of the Phantom 3 and just how intuitive it is as we go through the tutorial here. Charge time takes about 67 and 96 minutes to charge it, and that's dependent upon the charger that you have. If you have the charger that comes with it, it's going to take about 96 minutes. If you get the upgraded charger, it'll take about 67 minutes to charge each battery, and it's very advised that you wait until that battery gets to room temperature before you charge it. So now before we get into the flight, let's go ahead and take a look at the app because it's a pretty cool little app that they have that you download right onto your tablet or your phone to control your Phantom 3.
All right, so before we begin flying, I have to go ahead and hook up my cell phone to the remote. So I'm gonna go ahead and find my app here, the DJI Pilot app. Go into that DJI Pilot app. I'll get myself at that home screen, and I'll just go ahead and cinch this down so that my phone is nice and tight in here. Now, there's many devices that you can use for this. I have the Samsung Galaxy S5 that I use to control mine. It's just my everyday phone. I do intend on getting a tablet that will run it, but for now, this is what I'm using. So now I need to turn on the aircraft. Aircraft definitely tells you, hey, I am turning on, listen to me. And then we're gonna go ahead and turn on the remote and then go right here into the camera setting. And right now we're looking at the back of my car from the aircraft. So I'll go ahead and take this out here and put it out here. Let's just take some time to get acquainted with this app for now. So what you're seeing here is the display of what's actually being viewed from the camera on the app. So it's definitely a good idea to keep the drone within the line of sight and do not rely on this. I mainly use this display as my way of taking pictures and not necessarily how I fly. I do keep everything really close to me when I fly. I don't tend to take this thing out several miles. I'm still in the beginner phase, and I usually don't even go any farther than 400 feet away from me. It's pretty interesting because you can actually go right here into the settings, and in these settings on the actual quadcopter itself, you can tell it exactly how far you want it to be away. So you can go into the distance here. 119 is the most meters that I want to go up, which is about 400 feet. And then let's say I only want to go about 320 feet away from me. I'll just change this to 100 meters. And now I've basically created a GPS bubble around me that is about the size of 100 meters by 119 meters high. So I can't go outside of that flight area. It'll only fly within that area. You can try and fly, but it's like flying into a wall. So flying this guy is actually a lot easier than you would think. To actually take off, you have a takeoff button over here. You can go ahead and press that, and you'll see a little screen pop up. To ensure it's safe to fly, it'll hover 3.9 feet. So if you slide this over, your aircraft will actually begin to hover. And from there, you have your controls. You can move it up by pressing the up arrow here on the left-hand side of your remote. Press down to move it down. And then left and right on that stick, we'll go ahead and rotate the aircraft around. Rotating it all around there. Now, if you want to move it to the left or to the right, you have the joystick on the right-hand side, which is this guy right here. So we'll move this one over to the right. And the aircraft moves to the right. Move it over to the left. Aircraft moves to the left. Left and right, pretty simple to control. Push it forward, aircraft goes forward. And if you pull it backward, the aircraft comes backward. It's actually relatively easy to fly this once you get the hang of it. You know, you have to imagine yourself, you're not like a pilot where when you push down it goes up and when up it goes down. That had me crashing quite a few times after playing video games with the opposite directions. So once you get used to that, it's actually pretty easy. We'll go ahead and land it. You just bring it on down. Press down on the arrow key there on the left-hand side, that down joystick, and you've landed your aircraft. If you want to take off the engines without having to lift off, you just go ahead and put them both in the corners. And then press up, and now you're off. Once you're up and flying, it's actually not that difficult to manage the taking of pictures here. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that you have what looks like a shutter button. You click and hold this, it'll give you several different options. There's an HDR option in here. You've got a 357 burst, so you can burst fire. You've also got an HDR mode where you can actually auto exposure bracket and do your HDR stuff manually with either a 3 or 5, which is actually pretty powerful. And then you also have a timer, so you can time those shots as well. So we'll just do the regular single shot from here. Press and hold that button again to get you back. And all you have to do is point to where it is that you want on the screen. It'll automatically adjust the exposure based on the area that you select. If you select the sky, it's going to expose for the sky. If you select the trees, it's going to expose for the trees. Pretty simple. You just press the shutter button and it takes a picture. Now, to switch over to video mode, you can also just press this button right here and that'll switch you over to video mode. On the actual remote, you do have buttons to record video and pictures. So you can actually click a button on the remote and it'll do that for you. The remote has several different options there for controlling just about everything on the actual aircraft from the remote. Press the record button and you start recording video. So you can see everything on this display here as we move and we rotate. This is what we'll be recording video for, we're recording pictures for, as we go ahead and commence through our flight. Now you also have the option to change the settings for the camera. So you can go into the manual mode, and once you're in manual mode, you get to set the exposure based on the shutter speed of the ISO. It's a fixed aperture at 2.8, so you can't really do much about that. Get out of these settings here. You also have the same thing for the camera when you switch back to the camera mode. You'll notice that you do have the takeoff and landing buttons here on the left-hand side also. You can tell it to come home based off of the original location that you put it. If you do that and you slide this, it's going to say, okay, I'm going to go home. It's going to turn around from where it is, come back down to a landable area, turn around, rotate itself, and get itself right back to the home point that you selected from the very beginning of your flight.
All right, so let's take a look at some of this example footage here using the Phantom Pro. This is with the 4K. Now, you're not going to see the 4K quality here, and the reason why is because this is a 1080 video, because all the other video quality is 1080. So it is quite nerfed, if you want to call it that. But I called up the World War I Memorial in Kansas City and I asked them, hey, I've got a drone and I'd love to fly it out here. I know you're really busy all the time, so if I came out during sunrise when no one's there, the whole museum is closed, would it be okay if I did some aerial footage? And they said, absolutely, just don't land it on the top as someone else had done in the past and got it stuck up there. So I chose not to fly higher than the World War I Memorial, just maybe slightly higher by maybe 5 or 10 feet. And I did that for a couple reasons. I figured if anything would be flying in that area other than myself, they wouldn't be flying at the height of the memorial, so I was pretty safe there. You always have to think safety when you're flying here. And the video quality is impeccable here with the 4K video that you get from the Pro version of the Phantom 3. Now, I haven't seen the advanced, but I'm assuming that you have some pretty nice 1080K video there as well. Now, you're seeing here that I've gotten pretty refined as a pilot over my only couple hours or so of flight time. But in that, I've gotten a little bit better about jerky movements and jerky manipulations of the joysticks. You got to make sure you move nice and slow, otherwise it moves way too fast and the video just looks absolutely horrible. And I took probably about 20 or 30 horrible videos before I could get myself to control this. And if you see at the top of this, the only problem that I see with those aftermarket blade protectors is that they show up in the video if you go too high on the gimbal. So one thing about me is that I just can't leave well enough alone sometimes, and I'm talking to my brother about this DJI Phantom, and he said, how cool would it be if you attached an action figure that can fly, like, to the drone and see, take a view of it. I was like, that'd be pretty wicked. So I look at my son's Thor action figure. I figure out a way to rig up Thor so that he can fly through the air attached to the drone. I don't suggest you do it. He weighed it down quite a bit. Instead of hovering 3.9 feet, it only hovered about 1.5 feet off the ground, and it was really irritated in flight. It was not moving very fast, and it wasn't very happy. So something I experimented with and don't know if I'd ever do it again. But it made for a fun video. Let's take a look at some of these pictures that have come out of the DJI Phantom 3. This is a tone mapped image from 3 RAW files that I got out of the DJI Phantom 3. So you can get some pretty cool looking photos from this, even with this tone mapping process. Here's another tone mapped one in Kansas City. Excellent quality when you do a lot of work with it, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. And then we have this one. This is a single image that I edited in Adobe Camera Raw. So you can see, you can get some pretty good photos out of this, vantage points that you've never seen before. In my area, there's a lot of tall trees. You can see that. So for me to get every sunset is very difficult. So looking at footage like this, I can get up and over those trees and take shots that I've never been able to see before, which is absolutely incredible. I mean, the possibilities are truly endless with the vantage points that you can get at with the Phantom. So let's jump into Adobe Camera Raw and take a look at one of these DNG files or RAW files that comes out of the Phantom 3. Now the RAW files that come out of there are going to be about 4,000 pixels by about 3,000 pixels. It's roughly around there. They are .dng files, which is a traditional RAW file. They're about 12 megapixels, and they aren't that bad. It reminds me a lot of my old Olympus E30 and some of the frustrations that I used to have with the RAW files from there. This was taken at ISO 100, and I exposed for the sky, as you can see here. It's definitely something that you want to do when you're using the Phantom, because the sky is going to be really bright and the ground is going to usually be a lot darker. So you want to expose for the sky so that you can recover very easily. It's a lot easier to recover from opening up your shadows than it is to recover from trying to open up highlights. So let's take a look at this. Let's go ahead and zoom in here real quick and really look at this. At about 300, we're zoomed into about 200% here. And you can see that there is quite a bit of noise here. So if you know how to control noise pretty well in Adobe Camera Raw, I would suggest that. But it's almost one of those things that you're going to need some type of noise reduction software outside of Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom. I typically used Topaz Denoise on this. Let's look at chromatic aberrations. Now, it looks like we might have quite a bit of chromatic aberration here. I have noticed that the chromatic aberrations that come out of this camera are pretty bad around areas of high to low contrast. So we'll just take this, remove chromatic aberrations, and move that up, and we're pretty good there. Now, because I exposed for this guy, I do have a lot of leeway here on what I can do to open up my shadow areas if I wanted to make that stuff a little bit brighter. So when you're manipulating these RAW files, that's no different than any other RAW file from any other camera. We just have to understand that it's a 12 megapixel image from something that's typically meant for video, is how I see it. Because these RAW files, while they are easily editable, they are very noisy, and you can see there's a lot of color noise and there's a lot of noise in these images. What I also found is that nothing really seems in crisp focus, and that might not really be a problem with the camera itself. It's one of those things that it's a fixed 2.8 aperture. If you're a landscape photographer, you know that your aperture for landscape work is typically going to be between 8 and 16. So a lot of the fuzziness might come from the fact that it's a fixed 2.8 aperture. Again, it seems like it's really meant for video, but it has the picture capability also, but not nearly as powerful as the video quality like we saw before. So I'll dive into a tutorial on how to edit Phantom photos later. I just kind of wanted to show you what the DNGs look like because I'm a photographer. I bought this for photography purposes. This video is really designed for photographers, so I really want to take some time to look at these DNG files and show you that you can actually create some really amazing images from these that would actually print pretty well, probably pretty close up to about maybe the 20 by 30 range. Maybe that'd probably be the max that you could get out of that 12 megapixel image. However, I haven't done any printing yet. That is my next step with the images that I've gotten from my DJI Phantom. All right, so for my final thoughts on the Phantom 3 Professional, here's what I think about everything. The aircraft, excellent. It's a little beast of a machine. I mean, I've probably crashed this thing 4 or 5 times and still have not had any problems. Recalibrating everything is really simple, really easy, all done through the remote and the app. It's relatively easy to fly once you get the hang of it. The only problem that I see now is stuff that comes up with the FAA, and that is for a whole different tutorial because the FAA regulations on what a drone pilot can and cannot do are the only things that are really holding back this aircraft from being whatever the maximum of what the potential of what it can be. And I understand completely for safety reasons, for all the other aircraft that are in the sky. The remote, really easy to use. It's got a lot of buttons on it. None of the buttons are labeled, which is kind of a pain. But once you get in there and start using it, it really only takes about a good 5-10 minutes of your first flight to really utilize that remote to its maximum potential. It's not as hard as it looks once you get the hang of it. The battery. Well, yeah, I think the battery is interesting here. The reason why I gave it 4 instead of 5 stars is it's expensive. It's about $150 per battery if you want to replace that battery. The battery life, though, is a good 23 minutes on that battery life, and it's extremely smart. And all the fail-safes that are put in place for that battery with the aircraft, it's pretty phenomenal. I was doing the flight at Kansas City, and my battery was at the critical mark, and the aircraft came right back to me and said, hey, look, I'm coming back. My flight is about to be over. This is where the home point was. I'm coming back to the home point location. And when it got to the peak critical point, it just started landing. And it was only about maybe 5 feet in front of the original home point. So even though it wasn't at that original home point, it hit that critical point and came back and landed. And I think that's pretty awesome that the battery can do that with the aircraft. The video quality, absolutely 5 stars. It's superb. I haven't seen video quality quite like this. You know, you're flying 300 feet, taking video of trees, and you can see the individual highlights on each individual leaf. I mean, it is incredible what you can do with this 4K video. The photo quality, I'm not 100% impressed. I feel like in the age that we live in now, it should be a little bit easier to get a better photo quality in this little camera. I mean, I have a Samsung Galaxy S5 that does 16 megapixel stills, and they're pretty good. It doesn't shoot in RAW. The saving grace for the photos that come from the DJI Phantom are the fact that it shoots in RAW, which is very powerful. You do need some aftermarket software if you really want to take full advantage of the images, noise reduction, sharpening, so on and so forth, because with that fixed 2.8 aperture, it's really kind of difficult to get a good landscape quality image from the Phantom 3. But you can make it work. When I say that, I go back and I look at the original digital images that I was playing with, you know, back in the early 2000s, and they were 1-2 megapixel images that I used to print 8x10s and larger of. So you can still get a pretty good print from this. I'm just not as impressed with the photo quality as I think I could be from something like the Sony sensor and the DJI Phantom. The app, I definitely give the app 3 stars. The app, like I said in the video, I fly not using the app, but using line of sight. And the reason why I do that is because there have been 10 out of maybe the 35 flights that I've flown so far where the app froze. And I was looking at the same thing throughout the entire flight. So the only thing that I had to rely on to get myself back to where I was the visual line of sight and looking at that aircraft. That's why it's critical. If you see the front of the aircraft is the one that has the bands on it, the gold and blue bands on it. The front of the aircraft will also have red lights underneath the bottom to show you that that is the front. So sometimes you have to rely on the aircraft to get you back home because that DJI Pilot app may freeze on you. And now when I'm running the DJI Pilot app, I shut everything else off, so I'm only running that Pilot app, and I still have problems. I'd say I've had about 10 different instances where I was looking at the exact same thing that I saw before. I've had fatal crashes with that app where I'm in the middle of using it, it fatally crashes, and I'm looking at my clock on my phone while my Phantom is in the air. Doesn't affect the Phantom flight, and I'm still able to use the remote, but I just couldn't see anything from the app. Had to restart the app while the aircraft is in the air, and it just didn't feel 100% safe to me. So I don't fly with the use of the app. I can't rely on the app. However, my overall experience, definitely 4 out of 5 stars. Add up all those stars, give it the good average. You get a little bit over 4, about 4.5 stars here. A very good experience. This is probably the most fun that an adult male should have. But with that being said, it's not a toy. This thing is clearly not a toy because it can be very dangerous when those blades are spinning. If you get it close to a human, I would not doubt that this could cut a cheek in half, maybe even remove the tip of a finger with how fast those blades move. I've got many more experiences I could tell you about on that note there. Some very scary instances. One time my son and I were out there flying this, and he was screaming because a locust landed on him. And I was in the middle of landing the aircraft on his picnic table it was a good 15-20 feet away from us. And as I turned to look at him, the aircraft was still going down, and it was just off the picnic table, and it chopped the wood on the picnic table and literally was acting like a saw, chopping up the wood on the picnic table. So I had to replace my blades and so on and so forth. Everyone was safe, no problems. We were a good distance apart from this, but that is what made me realize that I need to get those blade protectors on there. And it's not necessarily to protect the blades, because I could care less if a blade breaks. It's to protect individuals from those blades. Now, the thing about those propeller guards, they aren't pretty. They don't look cool. There's nothing about them that looks cool, but it's kind of like safety goggles. You know, no one looks cool wearing safety goggles, but you wear them for the protection purposes. You know, no one looks cool with their leather gear on while they're riding their motorcycle. They'd rather be in flip-flops and shorts, but guess what? It's for protective purposes. They serve dual purposes. So just keep all that in mind, that this is not a toy. It is a very advanced piece of equipment that can add quite a bit to your arsenal as a photographer. You just have to make sure that you are adhering to the safety guidelines that are out there by the FAA, and also the safety guidelines. Just common sense here. Don't fly this around people. It's very imperative that you don't fly this around people. A couple reasons. It's not safe. If it lands on them, it's going to hurt them. And also, people don't like these right now. They don't like that you're flying overhead. So keep that in mind, is that it's kind of like being a skateboarder. You know, you might be having fun at the park with your skateboard, but to other people, you look like a criminal. Keep that in mind. Not saying that people that fly drones are criminals, but you get my point. Keep it in mind. Keep your safety practice in mind. Keep privacy and everything in mind while you're using this, and you'll have a great experience with your DJI Phantom 3. My name is Blake Rudis with Everyday HDR and HDRinsider.com. I can guarantee you are going to be seeing more videos with the DJI Phantom coming from me. So please like it, share it, subscribe, because if you subscribe, you'll get emails in your inbox that say when a new video is out. And if you like the DJI experience, you might just like some of the new tutorials I'm going to be coming out with over the next couple months. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it.
Look at some of the flight characteristics. Talking about the Phantom 3 Professional. So we're going to look at this guy for its flight characteristics. Why can't I get this right?
Stopped landing.